at-will employment is a really basic concept, so it's probably good to start there. Employment laws differ between state and state. Almost all states in the United States are at-will employment states. So at-will means that either employees or employers can terminate the employment relationship at any time, with or without notice, for any reason or no reason. So let's talk about that first. So it means that no one is obligated to do anything. I mean, in the United States, there's the courtesy of the 30 days notice. So if an employee wants to leave, then typically the employee will tell their boss they're resigning, and they'll take maybe 20 or 30 days to leave their employment. That's not necessary. You can leave anytime you want in an at-will situation. Same thing with an employer. So even though it feels really bad to be fired without notice, without warning, without being initially reprimanded or told that you better shape up or you'll be fired, an employer can actually fire you in 9 out of 10 situations without giving you any notice. And so there's lots of things that change this relationship, but for the most part, it's true that for any reason or no reason, they can fire you. The only two exceptions to that are significant are the employee was terminated for an unlawful reason. So the few reasons that they can't fire you for are in the United States are racial in nature. So for some discriminatory racially reason, for a discriminatory reason based on sex. So if you're female or male, based on national origin, so your ethnicity, and there are other protected categories like that where suddenly it makes it more difficult if this person doesn't like you for that, and that's why they fired you. But if you're not in a protected category, for example, they fired you because you're too tall, they fired you because you have red hair, they fired you because you don't like their favorite band. Pretty much any of those reasons could be potentially lawful reasons about which they could fire you at will. The second most significant reason is that someone can't be fired at will is because there's a contract in place that says there's a fixed term of employment, or this person has to be fired for a reason. They can't just be fired without any cause. And so oftentimes these types of limitations appear in employment agreements, which we'll talk about later, collective bargaining agreements with unions that we'll talk about later. And so pretty much if there's something in writing that says that you do have a certain right to be told why you're being fired and have a good reason for it, or if you're told that you're going to be there at the company for a certain period of time and you should have an expectation of working for a period of time, then that might change the at-will status. So getting into the beginning of practical tips, so as an employer, it's very, very strongly within your interest to ensure that you are maintaining that at-will relationship, assuming that you do want to maintain that at-will relationship, and we'll talk about reasons why you might want to have a fixed term later on. But employers should ensure that all employment-related documents, including any employment handbook that we'll talk about later and I'll elaborate on in another course, and workplace policies reaffirm the at-will relationship. These documents should not contain any provisions creating an express or implied contract undermining an employee's at-will status. So before I go forward, it might be useful to have an example of this. And so if in every conversation I have with someone, I say, I think that you're going to be at the company for a very long time. I don't see us even thinking about firing you for the next 6 months. And so you keep saying that to the person's face, and you say that or something like that in emails to this person. Even insofar as when you're sending them the offer letter for the job, or you're sending them the contract, you say, hey, this first 6 months is going to be great. I know there might be a lot of issues, but your job is completely safe for the first 6 months because we're going to be training you. That will provide documentation to undermine the idea that this person is at will and they can be fired for any or no reason. That might create an express contract, i.e. you actually said something, or it might be interpreted as an implied contract, so you didn't actually say the words, but all of your actions and all of your insinuations have led this person to believe that their job is safe. And so you want to avoid that in all employment-related documents. Some courts have held that provisions in an employee policy or handbook may modify the at-will presumption if the policy language is clear enough to create an express, enforceable, or implied contractual right. So, same thing as I said before, if you have an employee policy or employee handbook that says, hey, we're going to give you first a verbal warning, then a written warning, and then we are going to have a meeting with you, and if that meeting doesn't go well and you mess up one more time, we're going to fire you. If you say that that is what we do for every single infraction, and you can rely on it, and we don't have the right to do anything else except for that, then that person can impliedly or expressly expect to have to go through that disciplinary process before being fired. And so if you just fire this person without going through that process, suddenly this person's expectations about their job were not what you gave, were not what actually happened in real life, and so you can be held responsible for this, and they might have been considered the at-will relationship might have been jeopardized, and so now, because you didn't go through that process, you fired them inappropriately and unlawfully. For example, disciplinary policies that allow for discipline only under specific circumstances or through progressively rigorous disciplinary steps may inadvertently modify the at-will employment status. So it's exactly the situation that I told you before. You have this progressive discipline policy, it's enforced for everyone every time, and the policy doesn't have any loopholes to say, oh, well, we don't have to go through this policy if we don't want, then that's when you get in trouble. Employers should explicitly preserve the at-will status for at-will employees by including a disclaimer in workplace policies stating that disciplinary procedures and policies do not modify at-will employment and do not create a contract of employment, and the employer maintains the right to skip, repeat, or modify disciplinary procedures at its discretion. So yeah, I think that the big takeaways from this section are most people are at will. You should have a very strong reason for making someone not an at-will employee, and then finally, everything that you should do in both your actions, your talk with the person, and in writing should go forward to secure the fact that this person is at will and this person has no expectation in maintaining the job for any specific period of time. Finally, in all of your documents, like your employee handbook, you should make sure that you maintain the right to skip any disciplinary procedures and go straight to firing if necessary.